Mark, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. Nice to chat with you again and talk about oils and fluids. And I got a bunch of questions for you today. We had some requests to have Amsoil on to talk about gear oil. And I don't know a whole lot about gear oil other than what my owner's manual tells me to put in. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you and learning some more about it.
Yeah, thanks. It's good to be on again.
Now, when it comes to gear oils for 3/4, 1 ton trucks, what is a consumer truck owner going to find out there for choices? I think probably the first thing they do when it comes time is they look in their owner's manual and they say, "All right, I'm going to change it at this interval. This is the weight I should use." But how do you guys approach keeping the differential serviced and meeting the OEM specifications for what kind of weight it should have?
That's exactly what you said is what people do, right? Because the differential is not something that is top of mind. It's not something that is serviced frequently.
Yeah.
Heck, some people buy a truck and never service the rear diff, just because differentials now are coming factory filled with synthetics. They last longer. And I mean, ask yourself of the vehicle that you own, like outside of the engine and the filter that's on there, have you changed any other fluids? Coolant,
Not yeah. That's about
brake
it.
fluid. Do you know that stuff has to be changed? Transfer case, that stuff has to be changed, right? So it's just not top of mind of people, so they have to look for a reference, and the reference is going to be the manual. Owner's manual for the truck is going to tell them something, and it's going to tell them two things, really. It's going to tell you the spec to follow, and then it's going to tell you a viscosity that might be appropriate. Now, all of today's trucks are going to call for a GL5 gear oil. That's the spec. That's what sets performance of the product that they want in that differential. Now, depending on what differential you have, you have some vehicles that have limited slips in them, some that don't. Some have electronic lockers. There are some different frictional characteristics that you need to pay attention to depending on what's in that rear pumpkin. So any old GL5 just might not cut it. It might need a friction additive in order to make sure that limited slip still functions. The limited slip is there so that it can go around a corner and not chatter. But then when you want it to somewhat lock together so that it doesn't overspin one and implies to the other, you have posi-like rear end. If you don't have the right frictional characteristics, going around corners will be teeth chattering for you. You'll hear tires barking on the road and your rear end will start hopping on you. So yeah, fluid performance and what spec you look at in the manual is important, but then you need to know what you have in the rear end. And that might be just as difficult because the owner's manual itself will say, that rear end or that truck might come with 3 different rear ends, and then you have to figure out which one you have.
Yeah.
Well, how the hell do you do that? Like there's an axle tag, you can roll under the truck and you can get the VIN number off the axle tag and look it up. That's really the only way. Or the best way, I guess, to tell you what you have, or you just guess. A lot of people do that.
Well, I think one of the things that was driving the questions is a lot of the performance enthusiasts. They change the gearing in their trucks. They go with a lift and bigger tires, and the trucks are geared a certain way for factory performance or factory suspension. And so I think they're running into, hey, well, I'm doing gears. I should what should I run as far as a gear oil? And so I think that's an aspect to it that may hit a little bit sooner for people is you get 37s or 38s or something like that, and
Yeah.
you don't like the performance, so I'm going to do gears. And then, all right, what should I run? And that's where I get really confused when say I look in my owner's manual, I see what's recommended to be run in that specific axle, and then I do a search online and I look and I see all these different types or these different brands, and I wanted to focus in on Amsoil and what you guys offer for gear oil for a Ford or a GM or Ram truck, and I know tons of other ones as well, but just specific to the diesel applications.
Yeah, in general, we have we have gear. I mean, we have gear oil for all applications, right? So the other component you're going to see in your manual is some sort of viscosity. It's going to be 7590, 7585, 75 110, 75 140. And there's some vistas in between there, and all of it is, lots of it is about fuel economy. The lower weight viscosity, the thinner the fluid, the less resistance to flow, and the more fuel economy it could provide. Now, that's from an OEM perspective. That's what the OEM cares about. They need to meet fuel economy requirements, right? And then in order to do that, they put lower vis fluids in everything: transmission, diffs, engine, etc. Now, that's not typically our crowd. Our crowd doesn't necessarily care about fuel economy. They care about protection, right?
Yeah.
That's where we win. We're providing you the best protection that nearly money can buy, so you can feel confident in running big lifts, big tires, tuners, lots of heavy right foot operation. So the factory will put a lot of times 75 90s in differentials. A 1-ton truck can be factory filled with a 75 90, and the OEM will say, that's good for factory towing and everything else. And it might be, given an unmodified truck, pulling loads that they say, GVWR is what it's capable of. But to your point, what people do is they stuff bigger gears, taller tires, and then more power. And is the 90 weight really enough for them?
Yeah.
They might run into gear issues, and it's about that film thickness. As a 90 weight, can it manage that load separation between your ring and pinion? So a lot of times what folks will do is they'll go up in vis. So you can go to a 110 or a 140. It's pretty rare somebody would go over a 75 140 in anything you're going to run around on the street. We do sell fluids up in the 190 and the 240 range, but those are typically for either really severe drag operations or off-road, where they're not going any more than 20 miles an hour, but they have insane torques that they're trying to put through those axles. So, I mean, the safe thing to do if you're going to go up in height and up in tire is, probably go right to that 140 range. Some trucks out there, in fact, mine comes factory with 75 140, but not all trucks do, and not all axle combinations in those trucks do. The safe thing would be to do is go right to the 140. Now, are you going to lose out on some of that OEM advertised fuel economy? Well, I think if you were in the perfect world, in the perfect ambient conditions, under the perfect scientific conditions on a roller dyno, you could measure something, but not in your truck, not in my truck, not in daily operation. It's not happening. So you're going to go up in protection and sacrifice a little on advertised fuel economy, but it's not going to be measurable for you.
One of the questions we got in regards to it was about interval or service intervals. So if you go from, say up to a 140, your truck didn't come with it, and that's what you go to, or some other, level. Do you have extended service intervals?
So the service interval of the rear diff is truly dependent on and what you're doing with it, really. If you're going off-roading and you're putting that diff underwater or in mud holes, you probably want to check the fluid more frequently, right? Each rear diff has a front diff has venting, so if those vents, are allowing contaminants and water to come in, that's something you need to pay attention to. If you're just the guy that's on the street, never leaves the off-road, but he's pulling a lot, fifth wheel camper, huge trailer, 20,000 pounds behind you all the time, you're going to want to pay attention to your diff fluids. Now, does that mean you need to pay attention to them at an earlier frequency than what the OEM is recommending? Again, it depends on, the severity of your loads and whether you're going off-road or not. Otherwise, stick to what the OEM says. or you can follow what our recommendations are from the products that we use. I mean, we have lots of validation effort that proves out our service intervals with our fluids, even in severe temperatures. Heavy loading, heavy towing, shock loading to the rear end. So we warrant all of those service intervals that we apply. I mean, the only thing that would really point me to you should maintenance it more frequently, again, is if you're going through water, mud, lots of dirt operation, etc.
What was really cool about the question we got was on our Discord server, so I'm able to chat with and see a lot of the trucks that our listeners have, and the guy who asked, I think it's a 2020 Ram dually 6.7 Cummins, and every picture I've seen of his truck, he's got a trailer and something behind it. So it's somebody who's using that truck to tow a lot all the time, and I think that's what a lot of our listeners do with them. We definitely have that group of performance drag racing, sled pulling, but the vast majority of them are, using their trucks, and they might have, some upgrades done. So they're definitely in that realm of, a little bit more power, a little bit taller tires. They've done the gear change, and now they're looking for something to protect their investment, which, a lot of diesel truck owners, that's why they buy a diesel truck. They want the robustness of the engine, they want the longevity out of it, and that also translates to their axles and gears and everything else, transmissions, basically any fluid that the truck's going to take.
For anybody that's doing a lot of towing, not the guy that's just hot shotting around, just heavy into the right foot, stoplight to stoplight, but the guy that's doing a lot of towing, there's a lot of heat that goes in that rear end. And heat is what kills differential fluid. There's no byproducts of combustion from an engine, right? What kills differential fluid is moisture and heat. Well, heat can drive out moisture through the vent, but heat kills fluid. And what happens is, oxidation to oil increases viscosity. Every time that viscosity goes up, it creates more heat. More heat exacerbates oxidation. So it's the snowballing effect. More load, more heat, more viscosity. So the best thing you can do is, have a good fluid that gives protection, but then try to do what you can to mitigate the heat. And, so then you ask, well, how the heck do I do that? What am I going to do? Blow a fan across it? Well, in fact, if you've paid attention to any news recently, Banks has come out with a diff cover that does ram air cooling to the diff. Like, they are the only ones that have taken the bling to performance and built something into that rear diff cover that tries to keep it cool. So if you're doing a lot of heavy towing and you really want to give your rear end something beneficial, combine our best in synthetic gear oil that's going to give you best protection, and then a method for you to try to keep that rear end cool. And that diff cover does that.
Yeah, there's so many trucks I see, and you think of going to like Ultimate Call Out Challenge or any sort of diesel event. So many trucks have an aftermarket differential cover on their truck, and a lot of times guys get stuck with, well, I know it adds capacity, but how much does it add? And that's also something really important as well. Is if you buy a truck, it's got a diff cover on it, you got to figure out exactly how much fluid it's adding to it to be able to make sure, when you place your order and you're going to do, service your differential on the weekend or taking it to a shop, whatever it might be, exactly how much more that you have. I've read a few stories of, they look in the owner's manual, see how, what the capacity is. They've got an aftermarket diff cover, and then they're rebuilding an axle and a rear differential not too long after that. So that's definitely a important thing to factor in.
It's a nice thing about, part of those diff covers that people add, it's a lot about bling, right? There's a big advertisement hanging off the rear pumpkin. It looks cool. The additional fluid, should add some additional cooling. But if you follow the Banks prescription, that's not always beneficial. But with I think one of the really nice things that all those diff covers do is they add a drain and a fill. The factory diff cover does not have any of that. So you're in there with a scraper, scraping off RTV off that thing, pulling the diff cover only to change the fluid. That's annoying.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you're doing a lot of towing and you want to provide some cheap insurance to your rear end, buy that Banks diff cover, change the fluid. You could change it more frequently. Gear oil's not that expensive, and it doesn't take that much. Most trucks are 3 to 4 quarts ish, depending on what rear end you have. If you have a big Dana 80, maybe it's a little bit bigger. Maybe it's up to 6 quarts, but nonetheless, if you're $20 a gallon or $20 a quart into some gear lube and you're only 3 to 4 into it, it's pretty cheap insurance for your rear end, and you can do it in about 15 minutes.
That's worth it right there, just the savings in time.
Absolutely. Like, who wants to go under there with a putty knife, scrape an RTV off of a cover?
I don't.
What a pain in the rear. Why we could get long and hard into why the OEM does that, but I think that's just service income for them.
Well, I think that definitely answers the questions that we had gotten about gear oil, and then there were a few more that are gonna, it's gonna be kind of transitioning a little bit, but to the engine. And the this other question we had was about running a 15W. Actually, let me check real quick. I want to make sure I don't mess up the question that he had for us. Wanted to know about running a 15W40 in cold climates, with the acceptance that the truck has a block heater. So I know he lives in a colder climate. I think it's a 6.7 Cummins that he has. And, for those customers that you may have that are in colder climates, how does that weight, does it benefit that particular truck, or what would you recommend for somebody in a, colder kind of area?
His question's kind of loaded because he asks just straight 1540. Now, if you're saying conventional, I would say if you're in a colder climate, that truck might struggle a little bit to start. Today's technology with common rail and glow plugs, and if he's got a block heater and plugs it in, all three of those things working together, he probably won't have much of an issue. But conventional 1540 gets pretty thick, and crank speed's important for a diesel. So if you go 1540 conventional versus 1540 synthetic, your crank speed is going to be a lot faster. You take one step further and you go from 1540 synthetic to 540 synthetic, and now you're talking your crank speed is even quicker yet. That's going to remain fluid at much colder temperatures. So, our recommendation, for cold weather, like we're in northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, it gets frigid up here. I mean, it's pretty common for people to go to 540s in the wintertime. And then if they want to go back to a 1540 in the summer, they certainly can, but there's no reason to. The 540, the 5W gets you cold crank start, and then as it warms up, it gives you 40 weight protection. So you can run a 540 12 months a year. There's no reason to go back to a 1540. Now, if you live in the southern half of this country and the wintertime temperatures are 40 degrees, you can get away with a 1540 12 months out of the year. So maybe you don't want to pay for the additional benefits that the 540 gets you.
You'd mentioned synthetic, and that was another question, and I know this could probably be a whole podcast in itself. But somebody asked the question, okay, is Amsoil, is it 100% PAO? And I wanted to ask you about what that means if someone's not familiar with that, or just, conventional versus synthetic. How would you answer that question, or what would you tell somebody to look for when they're going to choose an engine oil?
That's a really loaded question, and we could spend a lot of time on this. If I was a customer new into the oil world and I'm trying to find, what's best for me, I wouldn't let some marketing get in the way of performance. Now, don't take that wrong. Like there is a lot of performance that comes with PAO base oils. So maybe we should back up and talk about what base oils go into engine oils. because I don't want people to confuse that I'm not saying that PAO isn't good base oil, because we use it and it's great base oil. But my point is that the entire formulation is what is important for performance. If I just used PAO base oil and didn't have a robust combination of additives in there, PAO base oil can't do the job alone. Neither can Group 3 base oil, neither can Group 2 base oil, neither can Group 1 base oil. It's a fully formulation of additives plus base oil that makes performance. So conventional products out there, they're in the Group 2 realm. People will use Group 2s with additives and make conventional base oils. Now, synthetic in this country is Group 3 and higher. So it's Group 3 PAOs, Group 5s, which are esters. So you can use a Group 3 with additives and make a really great synthetic product. You can use a combination of Group 3 and Group 4, which is PAO, with additives and make a really great product, or you can use straight PAO with additives and make a really great product. It depends on what you're doing with it. Are you making engine oil? Are you making diff fluids, tranny fluids, hydraulic oils? So it depends on the application is where I would say my choice of base oil will vary. And I can make a Group 3, I can take a Group 3 base oil with additives and outperform a PAO based with those same additives, depending on what I'm doing with it. So just because somebody in this country is out there tooting their horn that they use PAO doesn't mean that their formula is the best. That said, in the Group 3 world, that synthetic base oil, there are many manufacturers of Group 3, and they're not all created equal. So there's bookends of performance in the Group 3 area of good, better, and best. And if you pick, the best on the Group 3 world, it actually can outperform PAO in tests. So, the synthetic a long time ago started as PAO. I mean, Amsoil was there back in '72. We started the synthetic realm of engine oils, and we used PAO back then because that's all there was. We've gotten really smart and savvy and done a lot of validation over time. And we use both Group 3s and PAOs depending on the application. We know the applications well, and we design formulations, again, as the combination of base oil plus additives, and we validate that. So will I disclose what we put in the bottles? No, that's formulation proprietary to us. But again, just stating that the product is PAO doesn't necessarily make it the best. I can take a Group 3 and spank that PAO.
I think, yeah, that's what I was, when you were explaining it, I just started to get the wheel spinning with, it depends on the application, but then there's so many probably different choices that you have when you're making this that, as a truck owner, I just want a quick, easy answer, and it's like, that's definitely not a quick, easy answer because there's so many different things you can do with it based on, is it a race truck? Is it a truck that is towing all the time? Is it a commuter vehicle? Is it, how is it being used, and all the different options that you have to be able to make something that works, for that particular application.
I mean, it comes down to, what's, if, I'm a technical guy, right? So I have a different brain than most people. If I was going to go and search out two products, I'd be looking at all of the data that somebody can compare, right?
Yeah.
What do you publish? Can I compare that? What are your claims? Because those claims are typically based on some industry standard test. What are those results? But the reality is that I'm a unicorn. Not everybody thinks like me. I get that. People want to make decisions based on a little bit more of what tugs on their heartstrings, and does that brand, can they associate with that brand? So then it becomes more of, what is that brand into? Do they do the same things I do? Do they support racing? And I'm into that. That's great. Do they support a variety of other things? A lot of it's, brand association. This concept doesn't just apply to engine, it applies to everything. Like, ask yourself, when's the last time you changed brands of toothpaste? great question.
Yeah, I got to think about that.
Decades. People settle on something, and then it is insanely hard to get them to shift off that because they found a brand, it's
Yeah,
treated them right, they got great customer service, and it's never let them down.
yeah,
That's how people get to, a lot of times, that's how people get to the brands and the products that they choose. You know, they came to Amsoil a long time ago. They used some, heck, they might have started with two-stroke oil. Maybe changed the tranny fluid in their truck, and then all of a sudden they're like, wow, that stuff really treated me well. I'm just going to keep buying that stuff. It's typically, when you find success, you stick with that brand and branch out to continue with that success. You know, Amsoil doesn't just make a great engine oil and then stop there. We take all of the expertise that we have in technology and we roll it into everything we make, whether it's hydraulic oil, two-stroke, four-stroke, power sports stuff, trannies, engines, diffs, everything, coolants. The philosophy applies. So if you have success with, and you like one, then branching out within our own brand is the natural selection.
that's I see that a lot, and like on social media or Instagram, just different places, or even in my own experience with truck guys that I know. Is that's what they really like about Amsoil is they're going to do service on their truck while they're getting the engine oil. They're going to do drain and fill in the transmission. They're getting the transmission fluid. They're going to do their differentials, and they just get everything in one place, and they don't have to buy one here, buy something else there. And they like that complete solution, which is what's so cool about creating content and chatting with you guys is we can chat about gear oil, engine oil. We still need to chat about coolant and transmission fluid. I haven't forgotten about that episode we need to do.
I can do that too for hours.
Maybe we'll do that next time. But I appreciate you answering the questions that we got, helping shed some light on gear oil, what we should choose, and then getting a little bit into engine oils, which in our first episode we went through a lot of that, but there's still questions people are coming up with if they're new to diesel, or they just don't have a lot of information on which engine oil should I get, or I see this thing as an advertisement, or I read this someplace, and what's the best for my truck. So I appreciate your time and answering those questions for us.
It's hard for if it's somebody new to diesel or somebody that's been around diesel for a long time, it's hard to find good information. Everybody's got a website, and everybody tries to put the best and fancy stuff on their website to attract you to read up on it. I think where Amsoil goes to the next step is you can reach all of us. You can pick up the phone. We have a technical service department that can answer pertinent or any question that you could drum at them. And even guys like me are reachable. If you go to some big brands, you're not talking to a technology guy at Mobile. Like, sorry, that guy is so far removed. He's untouchable. But Amsoil is a smaller company and more customer service focused, in which if you have questions, all you need to know is a name, you call that person and you can talk to them, and that person will sit down and hash it out with you. So I mean, there's a customer service point to what we provide that also gives some benefit to those that are just new, or maybe been around for a while, and they've always had that desire to understand more, but just haven't pushed through yet.
Yeah, I definitely encourage anyone listening if they got specific questions, just give you guys a call. It's always really easy to be able to chat with someone, ask a question, make sure you're getting the right product for your application, and just learn more about it. We want to learn as much as we can about these trucks. We intend on keeping them for a while, and we just want to make sure that we have that durability, that reliability that you mentioned earlier in the podcast.
Yeah, you know this. If you've looked at the sale price of trucks these days, like you're going to sacrifice an arm and a leg to buy one now.
Yeah, if you can get it.
Yeah, right. I mean, I remember, was it 3 or 4 years ago? Diesel Power Challenge bought the most expensive brand truck from each of the three brands, and they topped $105,000. That was like 3 or 4 years ago. And I thought at that time that was ludicrous.
Yeah.
And now it's like, a quote unquote well-equipped truck is $85,000. I mean, you gotta be smart and take care of that thing because it's such a huge investment.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's where a lot of the questions about what products can I use for reliability and durability come from. And that's what was so cool about just being able to learn more, about the gears and or gear oil and the things people are doing with it, and just shed some light on it. So if we do buy that truck, or we have maybe an older one, we just want to make sure it lasts. We don't want to spend $85,000. Make sure that it keeps going. So it was
no kidding.
it was great to chat with you, Mark.
Sounds good.